Welcome gamers to this one-off video. We're going to be having a look at Feudal Glory 2 Medieval with the coming DLC, Rise of the Swiss. This is an exceptional DLC, I've got to say. I was really looking forward to the last one, which was to deal with the Longbowmen, because that was my favourite. It's essentially my favourite pack from the original Feudal Glory game, way back in the day. But this surpasses everything. There's just so much to love about what's in this particular pack. So let's get into it. Let's have a quick look and see what we actually have. Let's just go back into, go to campaigns. I'll sort of show you, I'll start here. And so the DLC is called Rise of the Swiss, and so the campaign chronicles, and this is actually just would be the start of the campaign. So the campaign chronicles the rise of the Swiss Confederacy from its beginnings as in an alliance of the three forest cantons, so Schwyz, Uri, and Unterwalden in 1291. Now, the actual main part of this is actually really much later. So through its expansion to include the other cantons of the old Swiss Confederacy and the growth of the legend of Swiss invincibility until the turn of the 16th century. So quite an interesting period that the Swiss dominated. The early Swiss victories were won with the halberd as the main weapon, but it was the widespread adoption of the pike at the end of the first quarter of the 15th century. So we're sort of looking at around about sort of like the 1420s that this is actually sort of then started the pike started to sort of take shape. And the aggressively mobile nature of the Swiss tactics. Now, the game is modelling this really quite exceptionally as well. There's actually a whole new classification of unit centred around these very mobile, heavy forces. So this is the aggressively mobile nature of the Swiss tactics that allowed them to become the terror of the battlefield and the most sought-after mercenaries in Europe. And they dominated that for quite some period of time. In fact, I think that's why we've got the Swiss Guard that look after the Vatican. And that's why they still actually are dressed in that sort of period costume for that current role. Really amazing, the history of that particular one. The other one that we have, which is quite interesting as well, which I'll be talking a fair bit, probably even more about than what happens with the Swiss, is the Hussite Wars. And so if we have a look at this one through here, the Hussites were an early Protestant Christian movement following the teachings of the reformer Jan Hus, and gained the support of the majority of the Czech population in Bohemia. So Bohemia, Czechoslovakia is essentially the old Bohemia, if you sort of heard about Bohemia. And so Prague, you've heard of the defenestration of Prague. I don't know if it talks about that one. There it is, first defenestration of Prague. And so the forces here, it ended up where the Catholics, and this is really, I guess, the start of the Reformation. This is 100 years prior to Martin Luther nailing his theses to the church door. So it's 100 years beforehand, but there was multiple crusades that were then held against the Hussites over quite a period of time. And the Hussites had an exceptional general called Jan Žižka, who and what he did is, so Jan Žižka revolutionized the way that the Hussites fought. The Hussites were mainly comprised of forces like farmers and city dwellers that really didn't have the training that professional troops actually had. So the crusaders that were going to be coming against them were knights in armour, and so you had these essentially farmers, and he had to try to find a way to make the farmers competitive against knights, and he did it exceptionally. And so the Hussite Wars were really all centred around battle wagons. I'm guessing it'll sort of show us that in somewhere. So this was largely in part due to the Hussites' novel tactical system. The army formed up inside a wagon fortress consisting of wagons protected by wooden hoardings, usually drawn up in a rectangle with the wagons joined together by chains. And so you end up with essentially like a lager of wagons. And so this same technology has actually gone all the way through. I mean, there's examples of it in World War II. I think the Italians used that sometimes in the Desert War, where they actually sort of got into almost like a wagon formation with some of their tanks to protect themselves. Of course, you've got the actual word lager itself coming from the Boer War, where the kids and even just the wagons of the old Wild West, where they sort of get into like a wagon circle. It's similar sort of thing happened here with the Hussite Wars. Very interesting. Anyway, I'll just read a little bit further on. So the crew of each wagon ideally consisted of 2 drivers, 2 handgunners, 6 crossbowmen, 4 flailmen, 4 halberdiers, and 2 pavesiers. And so pavesiers were essentially guys with shields. So the handgunners and crossbowmen shot from inside the wagon, while the flailmen and halberdiers defended the gaps between the wagons. The enemy would be goaded into attacking by artillery fire. So there's two different types of wagons. There's the standard battle wagon or war wagon, and then we've got the artillery wagons, and I'll show you that, what's coming with the actual DLC as well. After the initial enemy assault was repulsed, Hussite cavalry and infantry would counterattack to complete the victory. So keep this in mind when we have a look at the actual wagons themselves. It's really amazing the technology that Jan Žižka sort of then made it. Jan Žižka. There we go. Managed to sort of do with and actually make, as I say, a group of peasants essentially into a really exceptional fighting force. And this game, there's so many changes with the way that the first the Swiss and also these war wagons sort of do take place in the actual game itself. I'll show you some of the actual army listings so you get a bit of a feel for that. So we have a bunch of new and adapted army lists now in the game. Like we've got sort of like the late Bohemian different forces in through here, which we won't have a look at all of these different things. One thing that I know will interest a lot of you is going to be the Germanic Landsknechts, which are in the game. If you have a look at Imperial, like the late Imperial forces from the Germans, what you'll actually find is, and this looks exceptional. I do want to actually do a series on this because this looks like it's going to be a hell of a lot of fun to play as with the Landsknechts Landsknights, or I'll just call them Landsknechts, which is probably the incorrect pronunciation. But these actually have got a combination of all of the interesting things that we've sort of just spoken about. We've got the war wagons in through here, only 3, so not a hell of a lot of them. So it's just a small defensive line, essentially, that comes with these war wagons. Now, the war wagons can be used offensively and defensively, and you can see there the capabilities when you're holding over this one. You've got a mixture of flails, halberds, crossbows and handguns, but in the way that the game models that is to have a handgun at 12%, crossbows at 38% and heavy weapons at 50%. But again, it's really interesting when you sort of see the way that the game is actually mixing this in. It's such a pleasant surprise to see what's actually been done with this particular DLC. Like it's mind-blowingly good. Anyway, the other thing that I think that what most people will be interested in will be the Landsknecht Pikemens, which are keel units. Now, the keel units are really, really amazing, and I'll show you this in game as well. These are heavy foot, these particular Landsknechts. These are not; they don't have the same capabilities as the Swiss forces, but they're close. They do actually have the same keel aspect to them, though, and the impact with those you'll see there. It says immune to the ill effects of flank attacks and ignores enemy zone of controls unless the enemy is directly in front. Amazingly good units. So I know that a lot of you have been waiting for these. You can see there that the mounted men-at-arms are only 76 cost back and through here, whereas these are, like you start off with 1 in this particular mix. It's still predominantly going to be knights on horseback for the forces, but they do actually have a really interesting mix of different types of, like they've got bombards, which are essentially artillery, like that you've got in through there. You've got light guns as well, back and through there as well, which are sort of like just moved around on the battlefield. Pikemen, standard pikemen, which are just heavy foot. They don't have the keel formation. You've got as I say, the Landsknechts Pikemens, which is amazing units, so much better than the knights already. So anyway, that's I think something that a lot of you will be really, really interested in, and there's a lot in their list as well. So a very, very interesting force, that one there. Can't wait to play as these. There's so many different ways this can go. Anyway, we've got the then we go back down. These are the Hussites down through this side, and these are pretty close to being the same sort of forces back and through here. The Hussites, as I say, had to defend against Crusaders for an extremely long period of time and did it exceptionally well. And if we have a look at their armies in through this side, you'll see that they've got artillery wagons. Up to 2 of them can be brought in. Veteran war wagons. These are pretty cheap. They've only got 3 of those, but then you look at the actual war wagons themselves. They start with 3 and can have up to another 8. So these forces are really centered around these war wagons, so almost like a mobile fort. They do have some halberdiers back and through this side as well. They've got defensive spearmen. Now, they should actually have some They've got some men-at-arms, so they actually do have some knights, but most of their forces, I believe, were almost like the lighter men-at-arms in through here, which is just cavalry, superior cavalry. And so these would be used at the end of the battle to essentially crush whatever was left of the enemy forces after they'd been sort of dented their arms against the superior fortification that the war wagons provided. Again, really interesting army listing through this side. Let's just go straight down now to the Swiss forces. So you'll find that actually there's a fair few of the Germanic and there's even like the Yorkish. Now we're sort of seeing at the latter end of the 1400s, sort of now starting to sort of just before the pike and shot era. So we're sort of like just heading into the age of the musket and the age also of pikes as well. So the pikes are just starting to dominate the battlefield, but we don't actually have the gunpowder dominating to the same degree as it will within 100 years essentially. We've got Bohemian forces back and through this side as well. We've got early Bohemian, and then we've got, which I don't think will have war wagons. No, they do have halberdiers, so these are sort of like proto pikemen. We're not going to see pikemen in the early phase. So pikemen sort of came in after halberdiers. So halberdiers were sort of like the halfway point between, and halberdiers are just undrilled heavy foot, whereas actual pikemen are not undrilled. They are drilled heavy foot. So we can sort of just keep on moving down. The Bohemian Catholics, I'll just go Bohemian Catholic into this one here. These ones did adapt the war wagons, but not to the same degree as the Hussite forces. So these would have been against the Hussites. So in Bohemia, again, just interesting the way it sort of does work. These have got, again, halberdiers. They should start to see pikemen here. Oh, maybe not. Maybe not. Might still be. Yeah, they didn't actually use them. Okay, so pikemen were not really used in this part of the battlefield. But when we go further south to where Switzerland is, we've got the Swiss forces and the Germanic forces as well. That will then start to use the Landsknechts for the Germanic forces, and we then have for the Swiss. If we have a look at the latter Swiss, I'll just go to the late Swiss in through here. We then have very, very limited range of things that they can actually do. They've got like light horse crossbowmen, but not very many of them. Their forces consist of these exceptional pikemen. You can see the cost of these, 154. And so this is really the backbone of their army, is a very fast-moving pikemen in a deep keel formation. And we saw there before with the Landsknechts about what the keel formation can actually do. They're just amazingly powerful. So again, this would be a very simple army to use, but with very hard to stop, actually, as you'll see when we actually have a look at the actual battle itself. Let's actually go and do that right now. I'm sort of running out. I don't want to rabbit on for too long. I'll open up like a test game that I've built, so you can sort of see what the different forces can actually do. I'll start with just the Swiss halberdiers, which were sort of like these were determined foot, which is a new category in the game. Determined foot are essentially heavy foot, but can move an extra space, so they can move at 3. So they can really move a long distance through that side. So there they go, and I'll just undo that one. But that's how the determined foot actually then do work. But essentially these can form square, so I can actually have them form square. That way they can't be attacked from any angle, or there won't be any flanking attacks. But they also don't have a zone of control if they're in that sort of mode. If they're in, and they can't manoeuvre as well once they're actually in square, so they have to then come back out of square and then start to move around the battlefield. But that's sort of how the halberdiers work. So these are sort of like what we've already sort of seen in the game, except for the aspect of the determined foot. From there, the game then develops, and we then start to get the Swiss pikemen. So these are sort of like still determined heavy. It's determined foot, which makes them heavy, allows them to move at 3, and so they can sort of move a fair distance. And if we undo that one, they also then can also form square there as well. And so similar to the Swiss halberdiers, but they are better than the Swiss halberdiers. You'll see that the Swiss halberdiers, when I hover over them, all they have got is heavy weapons. These guys over through here have got heavy weapons at 20% and pike at 80%. So I'll just undo that one there. So we just sort of have that one go across. And even though it looks the same, these were the pikemen, I guess, before they then developed their exceptional pikemen. And so these are determined foot, keel formation. And so again, they can form square, which is very similar to what the others have got, or move the 3. So that's quite amazing. Again, with what they actually have in through there as well. So that's the Swiss pikeman keels units. Now, I would strongly suggest if you're playing as the Swiss, that you do try to get the keel units. And similarly, if you're playing as the Germans and you do have land-necked pikemen with keel abilities, then grab these as well. Now, these are only heavy foot. They're not determined foot, so they don't have the same degree of maneuverability. They can only move 2. So they'll just move up to 2, and that's as far as they can actually then go. But they also can still form square as well. So they can do the same thing where you don't get any sort of type of flanking attacks. Now, having said that, it's important that these older type of pikemen and halberdiers do use the square formation, as you'll see in just a minute, but these actually have got some other abilities which makes it sort of fairly different. Let's have a look at some of these abilities. I've got a few different things set up where I've got 2 different types. I've got Germanic pikemen through this side, which are just heavy foot, they're unmaneuverable, they can form square, and what I've done is I've put 2 opposing forces of Hussite, which are traditionally good against not so much pikemen as such, but against spearmen. So these are beyond, well beyond spearmen. Now you'll notice that these guys are locked in with the zone of control. They can't move forward. They can move backwards if they wanted to, and they could try to do that one, but they're under pressure from these other units. So that's the traditional pikeman, the standard pikeman. That's their ability. But watch this, with the same setup in through here, using land-necked keel units, they are not constrained by the zone of control unless someone's directly in front of them. So if you've got these in your army, then by all means make use of them. You can just go straight through and do whatever you like. It really is going to make people fighting against the land necks very, very difficult to contend with. It gives them such maneuverability. It doesn't end there though. There are other aspects. If we have a look at this one through this side, we've got I've got like just standard pikemen in through here, and I have land-necked pikemen in through this side as well. Now, if we have a look at these standard, these are just heavy foot pikemen. If I go and click from one of the flanking attacks and just go a control right, actually not control right click, if I do this one and then press control, you can see there this has got a flank charge, so it's got extra abilities with the actual flank maneuver. So it has like the points of advantage are the flank or rear attack gives them a +50. So that one does actually have a flank attack. This one from the front, of course, is not going to have that one, so it's harder for it to attack that side. This one here, because it's not constrained, I can actually do a flank attack. I will just hit that one from the side. So they then sort of swing around, but they're still facing the other side, out through this other way. That now allows me to then, now that they're engaged, I can then hit from the other flank or from the rear, and actually then get another. This one, the cohesion will now sort of drop on contact because of what's actually happened in through there. So that's sort of how you would then sort of take on a standard pikeman unit. But watch what happens when you've actually got your land neck pikeman. If I try to attack from the side or the front, is going to give me, again, you can see there the win is only 5%, the lose is 32%. If I attack from the flank, which is what we did in that previous example, I've got exactly the same impact problems. It's very, very difficult. The only weakness of a land-necked pikeman or any sort of keel unit is to hit it from the rear. And so that when we do get a flank attack, so cohesion won't drop on contact, it's not already in combat, but you can see there we do finally get an advantage this way. I'll just see if I can actually sort of show how this actually works in combat. Hopefully this thing will stay in the fight. Probably won't. Nope, held firm, actually got pushed back, so the pikeman pushed that one back. Let's try it this side. Again, we don't have the flank attack. Let's swing around. And that guy, unfortunately, got pushed back. But the only chance we really have of hitting these guys is to hit them from the rear. It's the, or we have to weaken them another way. So if we do a rear attack, now if we had have been able to get the, so we've now hit it with the rear attack, we've got them engaged. So this one should, like in the standard sort of fighting, this one hitting from the side would then have the advantage. So the fronting, it's still facing this other way. It's been hit from the rear. If I hit it from the side, we still don't have an advantage. And so these are exceptionally strong, except for anyone hitting from the 3 rear squares. So this attack is, we don't get an advantage here at all. It would only be, we'd have to wait for the next turn for them to turn around and face that one, and then hit them again with this one to get another rear attack before we would then be able to start to get them to lose cohesion just through sort of automatically hitting from a flank. But it's only from the rear, not from the sides. So just be aware of that if you're fighting against them or if you have them. Just you've got much better protection with these guys than what you've ever had before, and they're so much harder to stop as well, particularly with their ability to maneuver through forces unless you block the actual gap. You need them fully in front of them to stop them from doing that. All right, the next example is when we actually take them, because these are heavy foot, even though they're determined foot and they're in keel formation. If I have a look at this one and just press the control key again, you'll sort of see there that we actually have a problem. So to attack into rough, it's the same as a heavy unit. So morale disorder modifier. So a unit moderately disordered has got negative 22% in through there. So if we attack into rough, it's still the same sort of problem that we have as before. So we're probably going to lose this if we charge medium forces. So traditionally, medium forces wouldn't be able to stand up at all against keel units or any sort of pikeman units. But in this case, they actually prevail because they were in the rough. So if you are defending against keel units, make very good use of your rough terrain. And similarly through here, if they start in rough, it's going to be the same sort of deal. If I just press control, you can see there, morale disorder modifier, unit is moderately disordered because it's standing inside the rough terrain. In fact, if I press control over this one, so rough terrain, this one has now got more information in it than what it's had before. So rough ground, rough terrain, not open, disorders mounted elephants, heavy or determined foot, and undeployed war wagons. Severely disorders heavily armoured and fully armoured knights and cataphracts. So it's now got a lot more information about what's going on from these different areas. So if I attack medium forces in through here, it's disrupted and push them back. This is where medium forces can actually compete against these exceptionally good forces. Let's have a look now at the war wagons. So wagons now essentially come in 3 different flavours. You've got your standard old wagons, which have always been there. They move at 2. They're basically, if we control right click on these ones, they're heavy foot and their capabilities are defensive spearmen. The benefit that they have is they don't really have a flank. You can't really flank attack them. So they're difficult to bring down. That's sort of their one advantage. But then we come into the new forces. Now I've got like 3 artillery wagons in through this side and 3 of the new war wagons. We might start, we'll start with the artillery wagons, why not? This one has been deployed. You can see there's no horses, and whichever direction the horse is in will sort of have the deployment. Now, as far as the artillery wagons are concerned, it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter, they can fire to the front or behind, but once they're deployed, you can't change them around it again. There's nothing I can do with that particular wagon. It's now stuck, and so if we set that up in the battlefield, that's a permanent light artillery emplacement or embrasure, essentially with a fortification. And so attacking these from the angle will be safe. If I click on the ability to sort of see the field of fire, so you can see there, I can hit it from the flanks with that one selected, but I can actually be hit from these artillery anywhere out through this side. So just be aware of that this one does actually have the ability to fire from both sides when it's actually is deployed. When we have a look at these artillery wagons, these also then have the ability to fire to the left and the right as well, like when they're sort of moving. They don't have the same amount of power as when they actually are deployed, but to deploy these, like if I wanted to have it going off at a slightly different angle, all I would then just do is select the unit and then just right click, and you can see that I can actually either turn the unit, which means I can still sort of maneuver it, but once I deploy it, that's permanent. It now goes off in this sort of angle with the actual with the firing. So just be very careful that you have got exactly what you want when you do deploy these. if you want, and make sure you get to the exact area that you're looking for to actually deploy these wagons as well. The other thing that you can do with these, of course, is just move them forward. I'll show you about combat in just a minute as well with these sorts of wagons. The combat from a wagon here, which essentially is made up of light artillery with heavy weapons sort of around the outside of the actual unit. You can see there's units with flails. So one of the things that was interesting here was the use of flails, because that was what the peasants used threshers to sort of thresh the wheat and chaff and stuff like this, and so they were used to using essentially flails in their job, and so that's why they could actually have like unprofessional troops or non-professional troops, that not unprofessional but non-professional troops, to be really quite effective. And so when you set up like an actual fortification line with these guys, they really are super strong. So they, it's very hard for an enemy then to sort of to break through. And so the artillery wagons really do play a big role. They've got a very long range, which is quite nice. Not exceptional, but certainly can do a lot of damage if put in the right position on the actual battlefield. When we come to the war wagons themselves, these are also quite interesting. One of the things that's different with the war wagons, you can see this one that is deployed, where the gunners are inside, sort of looking through the little peepholes to then be able to sort of fire, and even the bottom is protected as well. These did sort of form like essentially a mini fortress, and again they can't really be attacked from any angle, and so the one thing we can do with these guys is to actually undeploy them, or like disembark the wagon crew. And so once they are deployed, that's one thing we can do, is to disembark them and then have them sort of march off. And these guys, when they actually, you can see there with their flails and their crossbows, etc. So these become just a medium foot group that once they actually sort of do leave the obstacle or the fortification, leaving the wagons there. And so they've got like handguns 12%, crossbows 38%, and heavy weapons 50%. But they are medium foot. So again, if you do need to then go outside the wagon, just be aware that these would be great in rough terrain. So just think ahead. Like, there's going to be so much nuance to the way that these guys can actually be played. Again, if we have a look at these guys, we've got like the 2 movement in through this side to position them so that they actually, this one they do actually have essentially a facing. So if I positioned it so that it was going to be facing to the front. Oh, by the way, look at this. Look at the field of fire with these guys. We've got like a very wide field of fire for them. In fact, if I just go back to here, and no, I'm not going to be able to undo the. I can undo the move, and then they're positioned back over on top. But I can't sort of do anything else with them. They're basically just sort of standing there, so that's okay. With these guys here, the field of fire is all the way around it. So it has like a very wide field of fire from the units firing from inside while it's actually moving. I should have shown that from in here. I think I can still do it. Let's just go and position it so we're going to be facing back the other way. So we'll deploy the war wagon, and you can see there it's still got fields of fire all the way around, even when it is actually deployed. And we've already had a look at the other things with the actual movement that we actually have through there. So again, a lot to like about these war wagons. These are exceptional. One of the things I would love to see with the game would be a Warhammer Fantasy orc force of war wagons. They've got to be inspired by by the history of what these war wagons actually sort of did bring to the fight. I would imagine just the orc war wagons that they actually had. So just exceptional forces to actually make use of this. So that's the basic use of them. If we have a look at these, I'll just show you basic combat. So these guys, the old standard wagons, can't do any attacks. They can maneuver, but they can't actually attack. So just be aware of that one. These guys here, though, like they've got some defensive spearmen in this side, which are undrilled heavy foot, and we've got our war wagons coming through as well. And if I just go and have a look and press Control, you can see there that our artillery wagon it's got heavy weapons, so it gets plus 100 from that one there. It's not defending an obstacle. Enemy spearmen. Yep, so they get a plus 100 as well because they're defensive. So the points of advantage we actually end up with is, defending obstacle is essentially what this thing is. It's a moving obstacle. And so we have a net point of advantage there of plus 25. So these actually do fight really quite effectively, even as sort of like troops, not so much shock troops, but they do actually have a reasonable combat capability against other troops. So don't be shy about using these in an offensive capability. So that's actually there's the artillery wagon, and the war wagon is exactly the same. So again, the difference here is that I can actually shoot at these guys if I wanted to, or I can actually then just do an attack where I have like the impact phase is going to give me a slight advantage against these defensive spearmen. So I can sort of go charging on in. After that, of course, we then struggle a little bit, but initially, at least we sort of can close the gap. Now, once that's sort of there, we're then fighting with an undeployed war wagon. That's sort of how they can then sort of be used. Let's have a look and see what happens here if we've got like war wagons. Now, the standard wagon, no matter which direction we attack it, from the rear or whatever else it might be, we're just not going to be able to really break through. So there's no such things as facings with any of these wagons. In the sort of sense, they are what they are. And you'll see through here as well the artillery wagons. Now we've got deployed and undeployed. So if I go back and sort of have a crack at these, like hitting it from the side, if I just press control over the top there, you'll see there that the reason that the Hussite have such a problem against these guys is that the Hussite are heavy weapons. They get plus 100, and the troop quality gives them a plus 50, but they're going against deployed artillery wagons. And so it's a heavy weapon is plus 100, counteracts the other heavy weapon, and defending fortification is a plus 100. And so the point of advantage that we actually have playing as a deployed war wagon is actually 50. And again, there's no facings here. It's all the same deal. It's there's no hitting it from a different sort of angle. They are a fortified wagon. Undeployed, we can have a look at this one as well, and you can see there we do actually have a difference here. And so we still don't have anything to do with the actual facing, so we still are attacking but we're attacking it undeployed. And so this one here, we still have the same heavy weapons counteracting each other. We've got the troop quality of the Hussite, which because they're exceptionally good heavy troops. For the war wagon, we do actually have the defending obstacle is now plus 25 instead of being plus 100. So in that instance, when it's deployed, the armor ability of the wagon goes sky high. Whoops, hang on, if I just right click and press control, you saw there defending fortifications of plus 100, and then this one here, when we do it, I'm doing the wrong one. Oops, hang on. Just go in, and this one is defending obstacle. So it's considered an obstacle, the actual wagon itself. And it's exactly the same with these guys as well. If we have a look and see, if we sort of go into this one here, when it's deployed, we actually do have the defending fortification of plus 100. Heavy weapons counteract each other. And so we do it in the impact phase. There is a problem for the Hussite. Again, doesn't matter which angle we attack that one. It's still going to be the same sort of deal here, where we do actually have the same problem because it's actually now a fortification. But when it's actually out and about, we still don't get a flanking manoeuvre against it, but it's just a defending obstacle at plus 25. So just be aware that these are much weaker for attack before they're deployed. So if you do need to try to crack through them, try to get them before they deploy. Once they're deployed, they're incredibly strong, very, very difficult to bring down. Now, of course, historically, this is just before the era of gunpowder, and so gunpowder would have done the job here. Still got a little bit more to show you. So what happens with them when they attack into rough terrain? So we'll do the same sort of deal that we had a look there before. Again, of course, the standard wagon can't attack, so that one can't do anything. The artillery and this one are basically the same in this sort of instance. So we can actually attack into rough ground against medium forces, but you'll see there is actually a problem. And so we've got we're still moderately disordered from what we actually are through here. So sending this unit in, it's going to be moderately disordered because essentially it's essentially like a heavy foot while it's actually undeployed. Of course, if I took these characters out of here, if I actually sort of moved them so that we had them, they don't undeploy. But sort of dismount. But I could technically dismount these down the bottom here. Just for the sake of the exercise. If you just have a quick look at this one through here, so we've got the moderately disordered. You'll see down through there, morale/disorder modifier. Our unit is moderately disordered, so we've got minus 22%. If we did take them off, disembark the wagon crew, so they're now a medium force, and now if we attack, we shouldn't have that moderately disordered, but it's still very, very even. So it's now mediums versus mediums to actually do the fight. But of course, we then have now dropped out of our fortification. So only do that at the last resort if you have to, but other than that, it's just another way of actually using these things to fight. There's just so many different things you can do. The permutations with this is just amazing. Now, the last thing we'll have a look at is the actual combat. So we've already had a look at sort of like the fields of fire. This one's deployed, and I can't maneuver this at all. So the light artillery gun can fire an exceptional distance through there and does equal damage whether it's close or far. So that really doesn't matter. But if you come in from the other angle, you can't be shot. So turn on this line of fire command, which is just the number 1 on your keyboard. So you can sort of toggle that on or off to have a bit of a look at that one if you are coming up against these, just so you can see if there's any way that you can bring forces outside of the line of fire to protect them a little bit. Because once they're deployed, that's it. They can't really be used. They can't. They then do have vulnerabilities. Having said that, I'll just show you the I guess the animation for these things. So we've got the cannon is inside, can fire either way. Doesn't matter whichever way it's been set up. And let's just fire at these guys. There we go. Bang. Isn't that cool? So the little doors open up. They then have a shot at these particular spearmen, and then it closes back up again, and we've still got the defensive formation. It's really such a game-changing DLC pack for this exceptional game. Anyway, guys, I've gone over time here. I thought I'd actually just sort of show this. As I say, I'm really super excited about this game. It's, not just the game, but the actual what this actually is going to be bringing to the game, this particular DLC. I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens with the game next. And I don't know, I've got no inside running with this, but does this then mean the final DLC for Field of Glory 2 Medieval, or is there still more to come? Will they take Field of Glory 2 Medieval into the Pike and Shot era, or will Pike and Shot, because there is a game that they put out before Field of Glory 2 Medieval, which is sort of like the test ground for building Field of Glory 2 Medieval. They called Pike and Shot, and so they actually have already done a game using this engine for the Pike and Shot era. But of course, the Field of Glory 2 has come much later, and so it's got a lot more. It's got a lot more of the quality of life things that you come to love with this particular game. And so I'm assuming that this may be the end of Field of Glory 2 Medieval, and maybe there's going to be a Pike and Shot 2. I don't know. Or will they continue on? Pike and Shot really is like the precursor into the muskets and so on and so forth of the Napoleonic era. So we're sort of looking at some interesting transitional periods through this side. I think Pike and Shot will be much more limited than what we've seen with Field of Glory 2 Medieval in terms of the different sorts of development that we've actually seen through this, as I say, just the exceptional strategic sort of simulation war game, a tabletop game. Just brilliant. Anyway, guys, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for watching. Special thank you to my Patreon supporters. If you do like this content, please consider liking and subscribing. Any interaction with the video is much appreciated because of the ever-present YouTube algorithm, which is a thorn in every YouTuber's side. Anyway, leave it there. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.